How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by the creator of Whiteboard Daily. Today, I am joined by the one and only Karl Eagleman. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It's an honor to be on your show, and also too, it's always fun to talk with other podcasts that are international. A lot of times I've been on. I don't know. I humbly say this. I've been on quite a few podcasts, but it's always fun to talk to other people who are in other parts of the world. So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to sit down here with you.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. And yeah, I'm always, especially from starting this podcast, I'm always surprised that people from different countries are wanting to jump on and chat with a coach from a coach from Leeds. But no, thanks a lot for taking time to jump on, Karl. How are you? What's been happening in your world? What's been happening recently with you?
Yeah, very well. A lot of stuff's been going on. I think the main highlight for me is I just had a book that was just released, which is one of those I don't know. It's a big milestone for me. I started Whiteboard Daily, the Instagram account, really in 2017, and always in the back of my mind, I always felt like it would be a cool accomplishment. It would be something very valuable for others to create a book of all the content that I was putting out on social media. And so to finally have that, to finally hold a book in my hands, that's the culmination of 5 years of illustrations, and to see my name on it, and to see it starting to arrive in other people's hands all across the world. I'll tell you what, it's so, it's a feeling that's hard to describe with words, to finally have that accomplishment of published author. I'm so just happy to finally mark that one off, and to proudly say that I'm working on another book, a second volume of that same, going along the same lines there. So that's really been one of the biggest highlights for me. Many other things going on, but I mean, we can talk about whatever you like. I don't want to talk too much. I feel like I babble on, especially when things I'm passionate about, and you might feel the same way. So you can kind of understand where I'm coming from there.
Yeah, definitely, and it is one of those things. To be a published author is awesome, especially seeing your name on it, and the fact that the book's gone out all around the guy, and put my wrong teeth in today, all around the world, which is absolutely awesome. Just with that, because obviously, and we'll go a little bit more into sort of your background in terms of coaching and putting the book together. But you mentioned there, a 5-year process. How was that? Because I know sometimes there's plenty of textbooks out there that coaches and athletes and clients will use, whereas to actually go through the process of actually getting a book published, editing, and all those sorts of things, how was that compared to the day-to-day coaching that you would do? Was that quite far out of what you used and got some time to get used to?
Yeah, it's I think the main theme between being a coach and working with athletes, and being, I guess, an author and working on a book, one of the most broad concepts is consistency, and just showing up every day, even on days that you don't feel like, maybe you feel less inclined to show up. Don't get me wrong, I'm very passionate about coaching, and I'm very passionate about seeing progress, not only with my own athletic performance, but also especially with the athletes that I work with. You have ups and downs, and sometimes things are clicking and you're feeling really good about yourself and about your athletes, and then other days you're like, man, just clocking it in and showing up. And you got to understand the importance of that. Even on days when you yourself feel like you don't feel as motivated as you did the week before, or the week or whatever, that it's so important to still just show up and do. Sometimes just go through the motions, because your body just kind of needs the practice. And it's one thing that I try to communicate to my athletes as well, is that like motivational quotes, motivation itself is like a feeling. it's just like you feel happy or sad. Being motivated is just a feeling. There's nothing really special about that. The importance is showing up and having the discipline to do the things that you don't really need. Discipline's like putting the actions. Discipline's the action. It's that's the important part. Motivation is just a feeling, and so you want them to understand that. Hey, listen, it's really easy to get motivated. You can scroll through social media and find motivational quotes or videos, but actually doing the action of showing up, that's where you get things done. So it applies both as a coach and also as a published author, is just chipping away one little bit at a time. So I mean, the lessons that we learn in the gym apply to all of our daily life. I'm sure that's something you can identify with as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because it is that thing of, especially if there's something, because you'll know yourself from speaking with other coaches and being in the gym. There's always that thought process of that passion to talk about training or nutrition, or to help your clients or your athletes to change that perspective and then put that down on paper and try and make it there in black and white so that people can use it. Yeah, I think that made sense in terms of the same principles apply. You've got to be consistent. The same principle or the same analogy that I use with the athletes and clients that I work with is a little bit like going to work. Not every day you're going to be bouncing through the door and be 100% all the time. Sometimes it's just got to be a case of I need to clock in and clock out, but get that done. And it's interesting what you say about motivation. There's that whole thing of motivation doesn't last all the time, but you can adjust your motivation into other things. Obviously, I did quite a brief introduction there, and you mentioned about over the past 5 years and creating Whiteboard Daily. Do you, just for anyone who might not know about the book or know about your background in coaching, do you just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, of course, appreciate that. So I always grew up being interested in athletics and human performance and being the best athlete that I could possibly be. I was kind of like, I guess you could call it a geek when it comes to like wanting to train, and I was the one who was like in high school, I would be by myself training after school, even if no one else was there to join me, just to learn how it felt to do like plyometric drills and sprinting drills. And I always, basketball was a really big sport for me. So I was always doing things to help me jump higher and to have good foot speed or whatever. So I would do those things in the off season by myself, and it would be pretty rudimentary. It'd be me finding a spot in the corner of the gym that no one else would go to, and I'd take duct tape and put it down and make my own dot drills. Back in the day, I'm not sure if they were very popular where you were, but we had these things called strength shoes, and they were like this. They were shoes that they had like a big block of like rubber on the toe, and so it forced you to always be on your toes. And so
Okay.
it would come like a video cassette, a VHS cassette of like these drills that you would do, to like line drills and hopping drills and stairs and steps and all these things that you would do with these strength shoes on. So I would do those by myself because no one else really kind of around my age had the interest of doing that. But that kind of like set the stage for like me wanting to help other people improve their own athletic performance. And so, I went to college. I played basketball for a Division II school. They're Division I now, but like when I was there, they were Division II. So it's still fairly competitive here in the States. Played basketball for 4 years. But then after that, I kind of wanted to get into like, the typical, I guess, bodybuilding regime, because that's really kind of the most popular program that you see for people who are in the gym. They kind of think like, well, I just want to build my muscles, and so I'm going to follow and do what the bodybuilders do. But then after that, I started to think about like, what's really functional for me. I want to apply what I'm doing here in the gym to like everyday life. And I learned about CrossFit. CrossFit really introduced me to a lot of other different sports, and I really enjoyed the CrossFit methodology. So, here I am, quite a few certifications later. Got my master's in kinesiology. I'm a head strength and conditioning coach for a high school here. That's my main job And I try to take all of these things that I've learned over the years of working with other people and working with myself and what works to help them be the best athletes that they can be. So it's always about just learning from your own personal experience and then applying that to help other people. And I try to be the coach now that I wish that I had when I was younger. I try to be the best coach that I can be, in the sense of like understanding where the athlete is coming from and trying to help them based on the lessons that I've learned, which is something that I'm sure that other coaches try to do. That's nothing new, but you just want to do the best that you can and lead by example, which is again probably something that, probably speaking your language there, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. There was a couple of things from there, and it actually falls quite nicely in sort of the first question that I wanted to touch on, because there was a couple of things there. Of You said at the start that you wanted to try these exercises, to see how they felt, like the plyometrics and those sorts of things, but then also balancing that with sort of increasing your knowledge and experience from the kinesiology that you learn. Quite hard to do a master's in that. I remember I lived in Australia and did kinesiology over there, and that was quite tough. So respect for doing that as a master's and building up that knowledge. And one of the biggest things is that, especially when you said there about trying to help people when people coming in, and probably more so talking about general population, but I'm sure it can apply to athletes as well, is that they sometimes don't know how things feel, or don't have that sort of body awareness when they're, when we're doing movement assessments or trying to coach them, right, this is how we do a squat, or this is how we do a deadlift, because, these are common exercises that you see people doing, wrong, or it takes some time to get it click in their brain. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were or experiences were from taking that knowledge from you feeling it yourself to your own knowledge and experience, and then how have you tried to merge them together and then work with the athletes and clients that you work with?
I think one of the main things, it really kind of stems from the whole reason why I created Whiteboard Daily, is because throughout my years of being an athlete and training to be the best athlete, I mean, I'm talking about like for a while there, and you mentioned you were in Australia for a while. I lived in New Zealand for 2 years, and that's really when I was given the opportunity to be a coach. There was a CrossFit affiliate there called CrossFit Mana in Palmerston North, New Zealand, and that just being there, having that opportunity to actually coach people in a sport that I loved. I still love it at the time. I don't do it so much anymore. I still admire it, love it, but I do different things now that's primarily strength based. But to be able to have the opportunity to coach other people, that's really where you have to put the you have to apply what you've learned. It's all these things that you're like, okay, I've seen other coaches do this. Now it's my time to like step up in front. And I remember the very first time that I was teaching the clean to a group, and I was like a coach that was like in training, and so they had like one of the head coaches there that was kind of watching me as I was teaching, and I got to the point where basically I was teaching the second pull of the clean, and I just I just froze in front of the class, and I was like, I don't know how to describe this, but you don't learn, you can't get better unless you're kind of put in those positions where you have to teach it. And thankfully the head coach, he's like, okay, here, let me take over for right now, and I'll turn it back over to you later on. So he kind of took over for teaching that second pull of the clean. But if it wasn't for those moments of like fight or flight, or of like really trial by fire, I guess they call it, where you really have to like, hey, how do I describe this to somebody? And the more you do it, the better you get, obviously. But I realized really quickly the importance of coaching cues, and I kind of see your brain, your mind is like a toolbox, and the more coaching cues that you have, that allows you to be more diverse in the people that you can reach, because there is not one golden cue that works for everybody. You want to be as versatile as you can when it comes to coaching, because everyone comes from different backgrounds, and different things work for different people. So the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more valuable you're going to be as a coach. You want to apply that to as many different people as possible. So going back to Whiteboard Daily and this book that I just came out with called the Book of Cues, the Whiteboard Daily Book of Cues. It's I don't know. I always thought it would be cool to have like a giant book of cues to help people understand how to move. And I never thought I would be the one to do it, but I mean, I was like, you know what? Whiteboard Daily lent itself very well to every single day just come out with something new and valuable for other people to help them be better coaches or athletes or movers. And so I just took all that content and I just put it into a book. And so now it's like, you know, coaching isn't cueing, but coaching cues are a big part of coaching that can help you be better. So it's all comes from personal experience, and as any coach out there, I would highly suggest that they kind of document their way along so that they can learn what works and what doesn't. And like I said, the more tools you have, the more valuable you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's that, you know, you said there about that the fight or flight response, and you know, you were training yourself, you know how to do those exercises yourself, but it's very different to then speak to people in front of you who might have never done that before. Or you know, I know I've had it before where people have come from other gyms, worked with other coaches, and they just have a different style, a different way of talking through it. And
Yeah.
just touching on that, do you think, especially, you know, from where you were in terms of, you know, coaching training compared to where you are now, do you think that's one of the biggest challenges that, you know, coaches and trainers coming through find, that they have this knowledge of their own training and how they can feel, and the knowledge from actually studying,
Mm-hmm.
but the main thing that maybe they need to bring their skill set up is communication, and just, you know, spending more hours speaking and trying to, you know, build relationships with clients?
Yeah, I see coaching. You know, the way my mind works, I think it's pretty obvious to people nowadays because I draw out a lot of movement sequences and coaching cues with stick figures because I want to make things as easy for people to understand as possible. So if you can take a complex movement like a clean or a snatch and then break it down to how it looks for just a stick figure, that's going to be pretty basic. And then from there, you even like you just concentrate on the first pull, the second pull, the third pull, or just like segments of like this long complex sentence. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I look at coaching as an art, and I think anybody probably does. Any coach kind of sees their craft as an art, and artists. There's a phrase that says like, you know, good artists borrow, but great artists steal. And what it means by that is like, you know, if you want to be a good coach, you're going to pick up on what other great coaches do. And you know, I've been doing this for quite some time, but I there's always I'm always looking at other coaches who I think are much more smart or much smarter than I am, or much more experienced, because I want to learn from them and what they do. There's always something, and don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm learning from other coaches that I feel like maybe are less experienced, because you can learn something from everybody. You know, you pick up a coaching cue that somebody sells, you're like, man, that makes sense because I've never heard that before. And I'm always trying to learn from other people. And like I said, coaches who are more experienced, but also coaches who are less experienced than me, because there's always something to learn. There's my favorite quote is from Maya Angelou, and she says, creativity is the one thing that you can never use up. The more you use, the more you get. And I feel like coaches need to implement that into their own cueing, because you need to be creative when it comes to reaching other people. If you stop learning, or if you just feel like, okay, I'm going to give you this one cue over and over and over again, chest up, chest up, chest up, chest up, but it's not working. Well, then you need to figure out a different way to communicate what you're trying to see when it comes to movement. So, you know, a lot of times people overlook the feet, because the feet kind of tell a story for the rest of the movement up the chain. So, you know, rather than like looking at someone and be like, oh man, that's just a train wreck right there, I don't even know where to begin. Well, kind of triage it and figure out, okay, what's the safest, how can we make it safer? Okay, now that we're making this movement safer, now how can we make it more efficient? and you just kind of work your way up and find things that are going to fix more than just one issue. That's what I try to do as a coach.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that stuck out for me there is the quote, you know, stealing things from other coaches, or I know the analogy of artists, and it's that thing of, if because there's lots of coaches out there who put some really good content out there, maybe on a little bit of a
Mhm.
tangent. Not every coach who shouts the loudest or who has a big following
Yeah,
is always right.
yeah.
But more often than not, if people are using their quotes or using their analogies or cues, and it's working, for the
Hmm.
clients that they're working with, there's a good chance, with maybe a few little tweaks, that is going to work for the clients that you're working with, because they are successful coaches. And I think sometimes there's that tendency for especially with social media and just the number of coaches who are trying to get into the industry or the field, if you like, where they feel as though they need something to set themselves apart. Whereas actually sometimes that can be more of a hindrance, because they're moving too far away from, the experience and knowledge of, coaches who have been doing it, a lot longer. Would you kind of
Hmm.
agree, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, here, I also want to make it really clear too. When I say great artists steal or great coaches steal, I do mean it in like, hey, listen, if it works for them, if you see a coach that you greatly admire and they say something a certain way, then use that. That's fine, because it's going to help. If it made an impact with you, it's likely going to help make an impact with other people. Now, I say this, I say it loosely, because stealing with also giving credit back to where you learned,
Yeah,
because I think that's really important, especially for our industry. If you want to, and that's kind of been the a main ethos of Whiteboard Daily. Is like I would draw a coaching cue, but I was very quick to say, hey, listen, I learned this from somebody else. It's about like what I learned from another coach. It's not like a Whiteboard Daily cue. This is something that inspired me that I hope will inspire you, and I learned it from that person or this person. Because when you are quick to build other people up and highlight other people, you're not only lifting them up, but you're also lifting yourself up as well. It's kind of like when you help others, you help yourself. And people appreciate that. I can list off the top of my head probably 10 coaches that I have been greatly influenced by throughout my career, and I'm very quick to uh, say where I've learned some of the things that I've learned, because in the big scheme of things, is like here's the deal: when you if I share a coaching cue with you that I learned from, say, Greg Everett, who is with Catalyst Athletics, I think he's probably one of the most influential coaches for me personally, because I just kind of understand very clearly how he coaches. It really resonates with me, and I've learned a lot of value from him. So if I share a coaching cue, they say, hey, listen, I picked this up from Greg Everett. Hopefully it helps you. Well, now it kind of builds my credibility, because it's not just about me, what I know. It's like, oh, he's using stuff that he learned from one of the greatest coaches that he knows. So it's like it builds my credibility when I say, hey, listen, this isn't something that I came up with. This is like some of the best coaches in the world are saying. So you can only benefit yourself and other people when you kind of, it's like a high tide lifts all boats. So let's do all we can to kind of raise the tides for all of us.
definitely. I thought that was a really good addition there. Give credit where credit's due. Why I actually had to
Yeah.
smile to myself there. One of the coaches that I work with, so he does more athletic performance, and works for a lot of speed for team athletes. And
Hmm.
someone actually took one of his training videos. It was basically a before and after of technique for sprinting, shared that, but the actual information or caption that was underneath it was actually wrong. It had no relevance to what the video
Oh
was. And
no.
it's kind of that thing of, exactly like what you say. If if you follow a coach and they put content out there and say, I took this from this guy, sometimes that coach is going to be more willing to help or answer any
Yeah.
questions, rather than, if it had being the other way around, and this person had messaged the coach and just being like, that's a really interesting post. Could you explain a little bit more? Not only does that benefit the knowledge of the coach, but then you've built a network then. And then that way, that's only going to improve you as a coach and improve the service to your clients. So yeah, I thought that was a really good point to make there. One thing that I wanted to touch on as well is obviously, especially because we've touched on the fact that a lot of coaches will put information or cues that they can use out there. What are kind of your thoughts, because there's lots of different assessments out there, and people use similar ones or use varied ones and kind of like movement standards. When we're talking about cues for exercises, but then also sort of the standards that you need to do those movements, what are kind of your thoughts of the process that you work with, or can movement standards change depending on who you're working with?
I 100% believe that movement standards can change based on population. I do also believe, though, that it's don't get me wrong, standards are extremely important. Standards are the measure by which you can see progress with an athlete. If you tell it, and that's, I'm about to start the school's year right now with my advanced high school weightlifting classes, and if they don't have a standard to meet, then it's kind of like up to their own determination of whether or not they're getting better. What I mean by that is this: it's something as simple as, like, if you're doing a push-up, and if my standard is your chest touches the ground on every rep, okay, well, now I know if I do 5 push-ups one day, and I know that my chest touches the ground every single time, but if I do 10 push-ups the next week, and my chest is touching the ground every single time, then I know that I've gotten stronger. But if I do 5 push-ups, but my chest barely touches the ground, and it might come 2 inches or 3 inches, or it might touch, then, like, where's the standard? I don't know if I'm getting stronger because there's no measurement there. It's like it's up to my own discretion as to, like, whether or not I'm going low enough. But if you have a unit of measure to say, like, okay, this is what I'm holding you to, now we can move forward. Now we have some kind of measurement to see if I'm getting better or not. It's kind of like, for lack of a better term. So standards are extremely important. I mean, if we're talking about squat depth, or if we're talking about locking out at the top of a rep, that sort of thing, you have to have some kind of standards there. Now, if you are working with athletes who are be coming off an injury, well, then we're going to look at our range of motion and, like, how deep we can get, or how far we can move through that range of motion. If we're working with senior citizens who have trouble at their end range of motion, well, then we have to make some accommodations there. But really, when it comes down to athletic performance, and those athletes who should be moving through a full range of motion, then we need to hold them to some kind of standard in order to have them know where their progress is coming from. I hope that makes sense. I think, especially, I mean, if you want to talk about standards, boy, early on, I'm not sure how many CrossFitters we have listening to this, but if you're into strength, somehow of CrossFit. But, like, early on, when CrossFit kind of first started to gain some popularity, standards were a massive issue with CrossFit, because you had the idea here that you had this constantly varied functional movement. So you're always doing something different, but you're doing something that involves a lot of joint movement. Say a thruster, for example, where you're doing a front squat into a push press, and you're doing that at a relatively high intensity. Well, if the idea of the workout is to get this work done, so you're going to have people who are moving very fast to get it done, but if they're not doing the full range of motion, then they're cheating themselves, really.
Yeah.
And so you would see videos that people would post, and it was really quick to see that, like, they're just doing it in an effort to get it done, not to get it done correctly. And nowadays, I think within the past 10 years or so, there's been a massive stress, a massive importance that's laid upon doing it well, doing it correctly first, and making sure. And there was a big campaign probably about 10, 12 years ago with Adrian Bosman, who was the head judge at the CrossFit Games, and he would say his big thing was no rep, because people would think like, oh, they're doing things that they should be doing as far as like standards, but like he's like, no, that's a no rep. You need to go back and do it better, that sort of thing. So standards are paramount when it comes to training and progress. You have to have standards in order to understand where you're improving.
Yeah, definitely, and that completely makes sense. From having spoken to CrossFit coaches and athletes, it isn't that. I think where, I know this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I think that's where, a lot of people get CrossFit wrong, where they just type in, right, what's a workout of the day? Yeah, I'm just going to do that. Where there's always got to be, it's like what you said there about the no rep, about not doing the correct technique or the correct standard. It's just that thought process of movement quality. There's a reason there of, you want to be making sure that exercise is done correctly. Going back to what you mentioned about if people doing the exercise, how can you make that safer? How can you make that more efficient? Because if you have those standards, then at least then it's like, right, I know if I'm getting better. Whereas, again, like what you mentioned, if everything was varied, you have no idea. If you change the exercises every single workout, every single week, you would have no idea whether your movement's getting better, or because there's got to be a skill component, or there is a skill component, to a lot of exercises, depending on the spectrum of the client that you're working with, or the exercise. And obviously a lot more exercises may have more skill than others, but in terms of when there are standards there, in terms of movement assessments or the exercises that you're doing, do you think that helps in terms of communication, and cues, or can sometimes that make it a little bit too rigid if those cues don't work for that person, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. This is kind of how I feel about it. I think that if I say I am watching somebody else who is not my athlete, and it might be on social media, it might be in the gym, or say you go to a Globo gym, just like your typical gym where anybody can go, and you see somebody over in the corner and they are doing some kind of odd version of a squat, okay? And in your mind, you're like, well, listen, if I was coaching them, the standard would be this. I would look for hip crease below the top of the knee. I would look for, full lockout at the very top. That's a point A and that's a point B as far as the standard goes. But say they're very shallow, say that they're not locking out at the top, whatever. Well, I don't know their goal. I don't know what they're training for. So in my mind, I'm gonna be like, hey, carry on. I'm just glad you're here. I'm just glad that you're lifting. I'm just glad that you're staying fit. I don't know what your goals are, but hey, it's not my business because you're not my athlete. So carry on, do it. As long as you're here, that's fine. I'm happy for you. So I think a lot of people need to understand, perhaps even coaches, like, listen, people train for different things all the time. People train for different life goals, or some people, they might not even care about standards, but at least they're in the gym. So I think it's important for coaches to understand, or maybe even just to keep their mouths shut when it comes to, like, if we see some kind of poor movement, hey, listen, we don't know what their goals are. If they want to go on, hey, I've got enough to worry about with my own athletes. I don't need to worry about somebody else. I'm going to keep my mouth shut and focus on my energy where it's important or where it's needed. Does that make sense to you? I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that's just kind of along the lines of what we're talking about, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. It's that thought process of, there's you've got to train the person that's in front of you. It's a little bit similar to having conversations with other coaches of, a big thing is that research and studies will be read, but for that target audience, or what the population that was done for that research, it's not going to apply to everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be that precise. Whereas, trying to someone who's training just CrossFit athletes, for example, even though weightlifting is going to be involved in CrossFit, then trying to set the standards of weightlifting, because there's weightlifting as a sport, and then there's CrossFit as a sport, because then that
Right.
way, there's certain strength standards in powerlifting, if we're talking from a performance side of view, but then also, if someone's coming back from an injury, they're going to have
Mm-hmm.
different standards to meet as they're coming through, and the cues from there, to be able to speak to them has to be matched to that person, which I completely agree with. In terms of some of the big rocks, in terms of the cues that you've used, is there some sort of go-to or favorites that you like?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few that I find myself saying quite often. I really tend to focus on cues that involve the feet, cues that involve the eyes, um, and because like I said, I work my way up from the ground up. So I'll say like whole foot, whole time, or meaning that you want to help the athlete try to find that tripod of the foot, because so much when you think about it, the most important thing when it comes to weightlifting is how you are connected to the ground, which is going to be through the foot. Okay, so if I'm up on my toes, or if I'm back on my heel, or if I'm the side of my foot, well, then I'm not putting full power through my body into the ground, which is where I'm connected. So, and I'll probably draw it up later on today because I was thinking about this last night, but like, full foot, full power. That's a good quote. That's a good cue that I'll probably draw up soon, because I feel like um, biomechanically you're designed to use the entire your foot. When I'm talking about the tripod, the heel and the 2 points on the outside of the toes, behind the big toe and behind the small toe, that tripod, if we can evenly put pressure through that foot, well then I know I'm putting as much pressure that my body can produce into the ground, and that's going to drive the bar up wherever I'm doing, whether back squat or press or whatever. So full foot, full force, full foot, full power, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's tough to like kind of fall back on the knees out one, but I try to have the athlete understand the importance of having the knees move in the same direction as the feet. I'll have them just stay with like a shoulder width stance, and I'll say, okay, just bend your knee and kind of lean to one side, lean to the other side, and look down and look at your knee and the direction of your knee. And I want your knee to go in the same direction as your foot. And so that can help them understand, okay, that's what he's looking for when we're talking about squat. If my knees are caving in, or if my knees are way out to the side, which is very rarely a problem, but definitely the knees coming in is an issue. Really what we're trying to do here is communicate effective movement. Coaches are communicators, and the more ways that we can kind of paint a picture of what we want the athlete to do of effective movement, that's going to help us be better. So really just, looking at the feet, the knees, the hips, those sorts of things. I commonly say eyes on the horizon, because the way our gym is set up, where I train or where I coach, we've got probably, I think it's 12 Olympic weightlifting platforms side by side with all the squat racks. And so I kind of walk up and down this walkway in between the two, and I'm looking at on both sides. And there's another row of racks as well. But what I'm doing is like I try to stand off to the side, so I'm not a distraction to them, and I'm looking at their movement kind of like at a 45-degree angle. And quite often, especially with the new movers, they're kind of, I don't want them to be distracted by me, but many times they will be. They'll be kind of like looking at me off the corner of their eye, being like, "Am I doing this right?" And I want them to understand, hey, listen, don't worry about me. Eyes on the horizon, because a lot of times, where your head goes, your body moves, and so I want them to like not worry about that. Just focus on a single point, whether it's on the ground or the horizon, so they can just. When your eyes are moving all around, it's easy to be distracted, and you kind of lose focus of what's going on with your body. So like one last thing too, in terms of coaching cues or of coaching movement, is really what we're doing is that we are teaching this connection with the mind and the body. If I say raise your right foot, it's easy for you and I'd be like, okay, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But like a lot of these novice movers, it might take them a second. And so if you can help them understand body awareness, and to not have to look at a body part when it's moving, but just have the feeling of that and the connection with the mind. That's really utmost importance. And so we do that by using coaching cues of like visualization or tactical or mental cues, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I could talk about it forever, but I think where I'm going with all of this.
Yeah, a couple of really good points in there, and a couple of things that you mentioned that just kind of reaffirmed to me that I'm not going too far wrong in terms of a couple of things that you mentioned. A big one there is, keeping your eyes on the horizon, because it's one of those things of I don't know whether it's a confidence thing or a reassurance thing, like what you mentioned, but they want to look and see if, oh, well, am I doing it right? Whereas actually,
Right.
tying into that body awareness and knowing what they're doing is just focus what they're doing with it within that moment. Because one of the big things is trying to increase that athlete or that client's knowledge, because the coach might not be there all the time, depending on, like, say, for example, if you're a personal trainer or coach who see your clients or athletes once a week, they might then go and do that session by themselves. So, I think that is really important to know about their body awareness and increase their knowledge of that, so they can know, because it's a lot different when a coach is saying something, but going back to our conversation right at the start, try it out so you can feel it yourself, and then you're going to be able to be like, right, so what does that feel like? And if they mention something, you can then add in cues to match that, rather than trying to start from scratch. And that kind of goes on to the next part that I wanted to talk about, in terms of the education or understanding of movement for coaches. What's your sort of thoughts right now, especially with the addition of the book that you mentioned, in terms of putting more content out there about communication, about cues, about movement, and being able to add quality service to clients, rather than trying to box movements into, no, this is how it should be done, rather than working with the person in front of you, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I am always amazed about, and here I am, I'm not sure how many miles you and I are away from each other, but we're still talking about things that we're both familiar with, because really movement is a universal language. When you see somebody moving well, it doesn't matter where you are from in the world, what country you live in, but you're like, man, like that person moves well. You can tell it's like this essence of virtuosity of doing very simple things extremely well, and or making hard things look very easy, that sort of thing. And I think that's one of the concepts that we as coaches need to embrace a little bit more, is like understanding, like, hey, listen, it doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, but we all have these essentially very similar makeup. Our bones, our bone structure, our muscle structure, the laws of biomechanics, the laws of physics are going to apply to everybody, regardless of where you are in the world. If you keep weight close to your body, that's going to be more efficient than holding weight out. Like the coaching cue, space is weakness, or keep it light, keep it tight to keep it light, that sort of thing. Like, I don't care where you're from, but regardless of your height or your anthropometrics or what language you speak, there are concepts that are going to apply to every single person. And so the more cues that you have at your disposal, and to be quick with it, and to have these sharpened in your mind, the better coach you're going to be. And again, at the same time too, try to avoid technical lingo, and try to embrace understanding. And that shouldn't take too much of a description there. Like, people really don't care. Like, they will be more impressed with you getting them to actually move well than they are going to be by understanding your verbiage that you use, external rotation and triple extension, and proprioception, and just like technical words that we might learn in academia. Like, really, instead of saying triple extension, just say jump, right? Or instead of saying external rotation, just say turn out, like that sort of thing, or elbows down, or armpits forward, that sort of thing. So it's like, people, the more simple you can make things, the better you're going to be received, because it'll apply to more people. was it Steve Jobs? I guess it kind of goes along the same lines, but it's like simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. Like if I can use less words to describe the same thing to you, well, then that's going to be more easy to understand, that sort of thing. Same message, less words. And I always say that, especially when I'm babbling on about things, but like really, that's what we want to do with our athletes. We want to use as few words as possible to maximize their impact on how they move.
Yeah, that less is more is because what was going around my head then, especially when I first started coaching, I'd say everything, try and give them as much information as you can. Whereas actually, you think back now and it's like, wow, I couldn't even. It's like if you've got a list of 20 jobs to do that day, there's going to be a couple that you're going to miss. Whereas if you've got one thing to do that day, you're going to do that. You're going to do a really good job of it. So I completely agree. Less is always more. And it kind of goes back or kind of come full circle from what we said at the start of, trying it out yourself, gaining experience, working and speaking to people, because I think that's, the journey of a coach. I'm sure, there's still going to be coaches now who are going to, come in and say, quite a lot of things, but that's where you refine those skills as a coach and, build those communication skills and find those cues that work for you. Quite a lot of topics and tangents thrown in there. I'm sure we could, keep talking about movement. The last question that I like to ask is, from everything that we've chatted about there, from the coaching, communication, cues, and also movement side of things, whether it be for an athlete or from a coach's point of view, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom, I guess also to bring it back full circle, right, is the consistency. That's such a big factor. Just showing up every day and being appreciative of the opportunities that you have in front of you and taking full advantage of those. Being a coach is a very special thing, at least in my perspective, because movements, quality of life, your fitness, these are big things. And I think when I was younger, especially when I got my bachelor's in communications, and I probably would have gone into some kind of physical education when I was younger, but I was like, man, like, how am I going to make a living doing that? I don't want to be like some kind of, minimum wage trainer in a gym somewhere. I want to make a big impact. I didn't know, I feel like the opportunities back then didn't exist like they do now. And to really understand like the important job that you have to help people move better because you're improving their quality of life. There's one of a close group that I've worked with in the past is Active Life. Active Life, they help coaches become better coaches and make it as a living. And their big thing is like gyms will be the healthcare in the future. And I really strongly believe that, in the sense that like the healthcare that we as people have, if we need help with some kind of medical condition, it's really quick to think, oh, you're going to go see a doctor about that. Well, the preventative side of that, rather than being reactive of going to a doctor after the issue has already occurred, the preventative side is like, well, hey, let's improve our quality of life first. And that starts in the gym, that starts with our own health, that starts in our kitchen and what we eat, that sort of thing. So to play a role in somebody's life to where you're affecting their quality of life through movement, that's a really important job. So take that serious. I guess another thing too, we talk about body awareness. As coaches, we're trying to teach people that connection with their body and their mind. But as a coach, as an individual, I think it's extremely important. What I've learned is to learn about your own personal awareness. And what I mean by that is like, everyone is different. Everyone's got different talents or skills or interests or passions. And this goes beyond just, you and I talking as coaches, but as human beings, like we have like different things that go on in our mind. Like, what I'm trying to say is this: you need to learn who you are and follow those things that you're passionate about. And the only way that you're going to figure that stuff out is by trying stuff. I am 40. I'm thinking I'm 44. I think I'm 44. I think I'm gonna turn.
I won't tell anyone. It's fine.
No, it's all right. But like, and it's like only now am I finally, like, probably within the past 5 years have I really truly followed my passions, and I feel fulfilled with like what I'm doing is because I'm following my passions. And so I want people to understand, like, you got to listen to those things that keep you up at night, and those things that make you different from other people, and those passions that you have. That's really important, to follow along those things, because if you're trying to be someone that you're not, that's it's like doing movement with poor form. Like, you're either going to get injured, or your progress is going to stall. So you might as well just like do you, like, find things that you want to do and that you're passionate about, because only then are you going to really truly, kind of like feel the essence of who you are, and make progress there. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, there was some really good sort of take-home points and some really good words of wisdom there. I think it's kind of that how that sort of resonated with me is that full package side of things. If you're really stressed at something that you don't really want to do, that's probably going to impact your ability to go to the gym, your movement, and it's going to stop
Yeah.
you doing what you want to do. It all goes hand in hand. What you do in the gym and the quality of movement that you do in the gym should impact the quality of life that you have outside of the gym. And I think that's really important. I know obviously within this chat, we spoke a lot about, movement standards, strength standards, and being able to have those coaching cues. Whereas ultimately, what is the end goal for that? Right. Well, actually, I want to be able to play with my kids. I don't want to be injured, or I want to get stronger so I can go to the high school football team, or whatever it may be. I think you can match that on level. So yeah, I thought that was a nice way of sort of summing everything up there. Thanks a lot, Karl, for taking the time to jump on. Really enjoyed chatting with you today. Quite a lot of, I think, useful points that people, athletes or coaches, can take away. For anyone who might have any questions about what we've spoken about today, see the content that you put out there, or reach out to you, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, the best place is just the Instagram account, Whiteboard Daily. That's usually where most of the activity is taking place. And also, too, yeah, check out my book. I promise you, it's going to bring you more value than what you pay for. It is 5 years of me trying to provide the best content for other coaches and athletes, through simple to understand illustrations and cues. And I promise you, it's gonna help you be a better coach, athlete, and mover. So yeah, check out the Whiteboard Daily Book of Cues. I promise you, you'll be happy with it. And yeah, again, I want to thank you, Stephen, for providing me with this opportunity just to sit down and speak with you. It's always great to meet other people from other parts of the world, and I really admire the hard work that you're doing to spread awareness and spread knowledge with other people. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for your kind words. On a selfish note, why I set the podcast up was to speak to coaches such as yourself, but also
Yeah.
to increase my knowledge for the service that
Yeah.
I provide to my clients and athletes. So I always say, if one person can take at least one thing from what we've chatted about today, that's kind of job done for me, because it only improves the quality of coaching, the quality of clients and athletes filtering that information out there to be like, look, there is content, there's resources out there that are going to be really useful. So yeah, thanks a lot, Karl, for taking the time to jump on.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.